Okay, we're going to talk about some polynomial long division. Okay, there are some steps that we got to go through as far as how we solve these problems. Again, this is something that we did do last year, so hopefully this rings a bell when you guys are going through it. First thing is we've got to remember what part goes inside the box and what part goes outside the box. The stuff on top, the thing that is being divided, that's what goes inside the box. So my 4x cubed minus 3x squared minus 8x plus 4 is going to go inside of my division box here, and the x minus 2 is what's going to go on the outside. Okay? Now, remember, when we are working through these problems, we are going to be asking ourselves, what times our first term of our divisor equals the first term of our dividend? And that's the first step. Okay? What times our first term here equals our first term here? And when we do that, we only pay attention to the first term. So what I would tell you guys to do is I would say, okay, we're going to say box times x, because x is our first term, equals 4x cubed. So what times x equals 4x cubed? Well, we're going to need a 4, okay, because 4 times x gives my 4x. And then how do I get from x cubed? Well, I need an x squared, okay? So I'm going to put that 4x squared up here, and I usually like to line up my like terms, so I'm going to put my 4x squared up here so that it's in line with my other x squared terms. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 4x squared, and I need to take that 4x squared, and I need to multiply it by my divisor. Okay? So when I'm saying that I need to take my 4x squared times x, but I'm talking not just the x, the whole divisors. That 4x squared has got to be taken times x minus 2, the whole thing. Okay? So I'm going to distribute 4x squared times x gives me a 4x cubed. And I write that down below here. Then I've also got to take my 4x squared times my negative 2. 4x squared times negative 2 gives me a negative 8x squared. Okay? So I asked myself first, what times what equals 4x cubed? Okay, I was looking at the leading coefficients. Then I found that it was 4x squared, and I actually took 4x squared times my divisor. Okay, and I wrote that underneath. The next thing I need to do is subtract. And there's something when we subtract that you need to know. There's a little saying that we say to help us remember. And that little saying is that we are going to draw the line and change the signs. Okay, so when you guys are doing this, you should say that every time. Draw the line and change the sign. So it was a positive 4x cubed, I made it negative. It was a negative 8x squared, I made it positive. Okay, and then I'm just going to combine like terms. This first term should cancel every time because we set it up that way. Then I've got a negative 3x squared and a positive 8x squared. That gives me a 5x squared. And then the last thing that we need to do is we're going to bring everything else down. Okay? So when I do that, I get a negative 8x plus a 4. Okay? And if you guys remember long division, you do a step like that, and then you just repeat the process all over again. So I'm going to go what times my leading coefficient, which is x, equals, well, now I've got a new leading coefficient. It's 5x squared. So this time I'm doing what times x equals 5x squared. So I'll come back over here and make my box. What times x equals 5x squared. Well, I've got to have a 5 in there. Okay, and it's an x, but it needs to be an x squared, so I'm going to say that's a 5x. So I've got a positive 5x now. Okay? Now I've got to take that positive 5x times my divisor, which is x minus 2. Okay? So 5x times x gives me 5x squared. 5x times a negative 2 gives me a negative 10x. Everybody say it with me. We are going to draw the line and change the signs. This first term canceled, just like I made it to. Negative 8x plus 10x gives me a positive 2x. And then I'm going to bring everything else down. I've got a positive 4. Excuse me. I'm going to repeat the whole process over again. What times x gives me a 2x? Okay, and I can come over here and make my little box. Times x gives me 2x. Well, I've already got an x, so I don't need anything else. The only thing I need is a 2. So I've got a positive 2. I've got to take that positive 2 times x minus 2, and you don't have to show it like the distributive property like I have. You can just say I'm taking 2 times x, gives me 2x. Taking 2 times a negative 2 gives me a negative 4. Now everybody say it with me. We are going to draw the line, change the signs. Okay, these two cancel here. Don't get yourself confused. That's a positive 4 and a positive 4. Those do not cancel. That gives me a positive 8. So we have a remainder with this problem, and that's okay. Okay, the way that we want to write our remainder is we are going to write it as a fraction. The first thing is that is a positive 8. So since that's a positive 8, I'm going to write a plus sign because that's positive. If that was a negative 8, we'd write a minus sign there. Now I'm going to write my remainder as a fraction. So what goes on top? Well, the 8 goes on top. And then what goes on the bottom of that 8? Well, what goes on the bottom of the 8 is going to be the divisor. So since it's x minus 2, we're going to put an x minus 2 here. So the answer to this problem, this answer to this long division problem, is 4x squared plus 5x plus 2 plus 8 over x minus 2. Okay, and that's how we do our long division. Okay, I'm hoping that sounded familiar to you guys because we did work through those pretty extensively last year. Okay, now we're going to do one more example before you guys try this one on your own. Okay, this one does have a trick because if you look at it, we've got an x cubed and then we go all the way down to a negative 1. So you might be asking yourself, well, there should be some stuff there in the middle. Where's my x squared? Where's my x? Okay, well, they didn't write them there, but we are going to have to write them in before you can do your division. Okay, and we call those placeholders. Okay, your placeholders will have a coefficient of 0. So our coefficients will be 0. So when I do this, you cannot do it unless you have placeholders. You have to write this in there. I'm going to write this as x cubed, and then I'm just going to do a plus 0 x squared. A lot of times I get kids ask, can it be a minus? Well, yeah, because 0 is not really positive or negative. So I would just make it positive because that's way less confusing than if it's a minus. Okay? I need an x, so I'm going to put plus 0x. And then I have my minus 1. Okay, so those are my placeholders there. Draw my box, and I've got an x minus 1 out here. I will tell you the most common mistake is when you guys do placeholders is you'll do x minus 1, and then you'll put x cubed plus x squared plus x minus 1. And that is incorrect, okay, because that is a completely different problem. If you guys put x squared and x, you've given them values. You've said that they've had a value of 1, but they don't have a value of 1. There's nothing up there. They have a value of 0. So make sure that your placeholders have coefficients of 0. Okay? Now that we do that, we're going to go through the same pattern we did. So what times x gives me x cubed. Okay, pause the video, try it on your own, see if you guys got the hang of it. All right, so I got what times x gave me x cubed. Well, the answer would be x squared. Okay, so I'm going to put my x squared up here. I then need to take my x squared times my divisor. So that's x squared times x and x squared times negative 1. So when I do that, that gives me an x cubed minus an x squared. Okay, I'm going to draw the line, change the signs. My x cubes cancel. I've got a 0x squared and a positive x squared, so that just gives me just an x squared. And then I'm going to bring everything down. I've got a 0x. I've got a negative 1. Okay? Remember, our pattern just repeats itself. So what times x gives me x squared? What times x gives me x squared? Well, x times x would give me an x squared. That's a positive x. Okay? So I'm going to take x times x gives me x squared. I'm going to take x times negative 1, and that gives me a negative x. Everybody say it with me. We're going to draw the line, change the signs. My x squareds are gone like I wanted them to be. 0x plus x gives me an x, and then I drop down my negative 1. Okay? Again, repeat our steps. What times x gives me x. So what times x gives me x? So what times itself gives you itself? It's just going to be a 1 in there. So I've got a positive 1. 1 times x gives me an x. Whoops. Gives me an x. 1 times negative 1 gives me a negative 1. Again, everybody say it with me. Draw the line. Change the signs. My x's cancel like I wanted. Now I have a negative 1 and a positive 1. That does cancel. So I have no remainder. So if you have no remainder, you don't have to worry about writing anything up there. Your answer is just x squared plus x plus 1. Okay, so that's your guys' little reminder on long division. If you don't have a variable in there, you're going to have to add a placeholder for it. So don't forget about those. Okay, this last video we have is going to be on synthetic division, and that's something new that I don't think you guys have seen before. It is the exact same thing as long division. So some of you guys might, it does the same thing as long division. It's not the same. So watch that video, explain how to do that synthetic division. You might decide you like that better than your long division.